welcome to the Vigilate Dialogues. I am your host, Shaina Smith, welcoming you to a special edition of the National Boardroom. Over the past few weeks, we've been talking about our Stop the Violence VI campaign. So tonight we're going to continue that conversation around where we think that these activities are coming from, and more importantly, what the solutions are. So with me this evening, I have Mr. Dickson Igwe, a local commentary writer. He also works in our education system, as well as Mr. Frank Mahoney, known with a lot of roles. I don't know how to introduce you. You'll tell us later all what you're going to do. But we're going to get into our conversation tonight and hopefully bring some insight or revelation as far as where we are as a community, because based on what we're seeing in our media, you know, it's really concerning. So I want us to continue that conversation where we're trying to find the solutions to what's going on. Gentlemen, thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting us.
All right. So we've started a conversation and been talking about, you know, we're seeing an increase in crime and violence, we're including in the conversation, you know, things like bullying, things like domestic violence, things like child abuse, in addition to the gun crime, because people get excited about gun crime. But for me, when I look across the gamut of what's happening, you know, when you look at the police blotter, it's a lot of violence that I'm seeing over the last 5 to 10 years. So, you know, I feel there's something going on. There seems to be a lot of blaming going on, and that's not really going to help the situation. So the idea tonight is to kind of pick it apart and see exactly what our issues are. So where do we think that, from your perspectives, your individual perspectives, the increase in violent behavior is coming from in our society?
Well, for me, you know, I ask this question. I say, where is this thing coming from? Where is this this crime coming from? And I look back. You have to look at the antecedents, right? Don't forget the BVI, and you have to look at history, because crime is a very complex issue. It's not just, you know, what happened today or what happened yesterday. You have to look right back and look at the history. And the BVI was an agrarian community, right? It was kind of a maritime agriculture. Everybody knew each other. It was a one village, right? And then came tourism and finance, you know, and the economy shifted from agrarian to services. Okay. And then so because of that, we had a lot of migration coming into the community, and that village dynamic disappeared. Okay. And so now you no longer have one community in the BVI, even though it's not politically correct to say, you know, but you have many communities. You have the main community, which is the native community, but you have other communities now. Okay. And a lot of these communities have people who look within the community and not without.
Okay. Frank, what about you?
I agree with the gentleman wholeheartedly. When we speak of violence, violence has existed from the beginning of time. The world on a whole has been at war more than it has been at peace. As a matter of fact, from the beginning of time, the world has been at war. Right now, there are places that are at war. We're a product of our society. While I appreciate what he's saying about the different societies, the violence that we're seeing is across the board. It's not just locals, it's not just Long Island people, it's not just poor people, it's not just rich people. It's happening across the board. And then we have to ask ourselves, what has changed over the last 50 years? I remember growing up in New York, and one of the things we used to brag about is we had no violence and police carried no guns. That was a bragging right that the BVI had for the longest, you know. And the respect, again, we're a product of our society. You know, up to this day, I can't say damn in front of my mother or my aunts. I would never, ever dream of lifting my hand to my mother or any of my aunts or any of my uncle, even if they hit me a clout. Because we grew up whereas you had that much respect for your elders.
The values
I still joke around sometimes when I see people in the village that, you know, where my family's from, Carrot Bay. When I used to come for the summers, the people passing by, if you're outside after the sun has set, they'd bawl out, go home to your mother.
Right.
You know, so I think we're a product of our society. And the world and the BVI is part of a global village. access to the internet, to television, to radio, to other cultures, whether it be good or bad, plays a role. The broken families, whereas there's single parents home to an extreme, whereas there are grandmothers that are 25 years old, all play a role, as well as economic opportunity, education, and a number of other things.
Okay. And we're going to get into that because that was one of the things that has come out in the previous conversations that I've had where, you know, one of the starting points is with the family because that's where you learn your behaviors for the most part until you start to now socially interact. So it's school, it's church, it's within your village. And from there, you know, things start to evolve a bit.
But the BVI was a homogeneous community in the 70s and 80s, okay? And you know, I'm sure if you did research, you'll find that there's less crime in homogeneous communities. Where, what I mean homogeneous, where the communities, they're all interlinked, you know, they're all of the same ethnicity, they're all of the same kind of cultural subset.
Similar backgrounds there.
Right? You know, but that changed completely. You know, with the change in the economy. So whereas it was just one village, the BVI, essentially, from what I understand, right? East End, West End, everybody knew each other. You know, so if something happened in one part of the community, everybody knew who it was. Everybody knew, but that's all changed now.
Yeah.
Now you have different community. You have the native community, you have the Asian community, you have Syrian community, you have the Caucasian community. You have different communities, and let's be honest, they don't all necessarily interact and integrate very well these days.
Yeah.
Okay, a lot of people will deny it. I will say it. I don't, you know, I will say it. You have a lot of communities who will very many parallels in the BVI. There's no real integration. Let's be honest. There's no real integration, and that makes the life of the police difficult. Okay, difficult because when there's a tendency to protect your little community, your little Jerusalem. So if a member of my Jerusalem commit a crime, right, there's a tendency to, you know, because you're looking at other communities and say, if I must protect my own.
Okay.
Okay, you know,
so
I'm not being very politically correct.
It's difficult to penetrate now.
You're not penetrating. You're not going to penetrate because you're not from my community, and that is the subset we have now.
Okay. So in terms of even the public outcry, do you think there has been one as far as what's been happening in our community, or because for me it's been very 8 days talk and that's it?
Well, unfortunately, that has become true of the most horrific crimes. We've become desensitized to violence. We've decided and we've judged who should be mourned and for how long, depending on their status in the society. And sometimes we fail to forget that while that young person is going through its stages in life, maybe making some wrong decisions, they still have a mother, they still have a brother, they still have a father, they still have people who, while they may not have been close, there's a family that has been affected by that person's either violence towards that person or that person's death. And it's not a big deal anymore, unfortunately. A young man died the other day. It'll flash across the news as breaking news.
8 days talk.
Next week,
yeah,
he's forgotten. And, you know, crime and violence, we love to point our fingers at the young people. But at the end of the day, where do young people learn their behavior? And it's not just by their environment. Of course, a great deal happens on television and the internet and so forth that influence them. But when you have a bridge like the bridge in Beef Island that might have cost $500,000 realistically, and it ends up costing millions, that is a crime. The children are watching.
Yeah.
Were the people punished? No.
Right.
What does that say?
There's a message
that sends a message now to the young people. So, but because these people have certain last names and positions in society, we look at their crime as not so much violent. But at the end of the day, it is violent. Because money that should have gone into school programs, money that could have gone to help single mothers, money that could have gone to pre-care, money that could have gone to first grade education, does not exist. And because it doesn't exist, the opportunities that that young person may or could have had also doesn't exist, which then narrows their opportunity.
Right. See, I'm looking at the crime detection right now, detecting crime. You know where I'm coming from? And what I see now is that it's much harder to detect crime in the BVI today than it probably was in the 80s or 90s, because there's been a shift in the community.
But it's interesting that you said that, because just today I was by the police station, one of the stations, and something I was talking with an officer about, and he said, well, yeah, the police know everything. I say, yeah, that's the case, but we still got some unsolved crimes we need to deal with. So we were talking, I think, this probably would have been another show where we were saying that we know who's committing what. Just like similar like the example, whether it's white collar crime or if it's bullying in schools. Like that situation where the young girl was hospitalized, and as far as we know, nothing came out of it, or at least nothing was discussed publicly to say, well, we need to send a message to the rest of the students to say this is not acceptable behavior.
Correct.
And make sure that if there is going to be zero tolerance, that it is the opportunities are not missed, I would say, in regards to that. So there are some different things I think going on as far as the dynamics, but we'll talk about the detection. What I want to touch on just before we get ready to go to a break in a few though, is when we look at our society, there are various institutions, what we call social institutions that are part of any community. So we got the family, the schools, the churches, government, including the judicial system as part of that, as well as your civic society, which would be like your businesses, your NGOs and NPOs. So when we're looking at root causes, I'm seeing where all of them are playing a factor. But I want to hear from you guys as far as especially with the family. We touched on that a bit as far as, children learn their behavior at home. There's a saying that children wear two things, their clothes and their parents. So a lot of times when they leave the house and they're behaving and cutting up a certain way, it's because this is what they see at home. They're wearing their parents. What else do you see in terms of the family dynamic? Because some people blame single parenting, but I don't think single parenting is necessarily a factor.
We still cannot run away from the fact, and I'm going to continue to hit this point because I'm writing a column about this week about this. We cannot run away from the fact that there's been a shift in the society. And because you always had single parents in the BVI. You always had, in fact, BVI the Caribbean is a matriarchal community. The mother plays a dominant role in Caribbean families. The problem, from my observation, has been that shift from the village. So you no longer have that tight knit community, or you have tight knit communities within the community. And if a member of this sector of the community commits a crime, there's a tendency not to talk too much, because now we have other communities in the BVI, and it looks like there's a dynamic here. It's controversial, but I'm not gonna, there's a tendency to say this is one of us, okay?
Yeah,
one of us. That's it.
So part of that dynamic is also when you're looking at where the police officers are from versus who the criminals are.
It has a part to play.
Okay.
It has. I talked about homogeneous societies. A homogeneous society is a society where it's made up of one ethnicity. Everybody's linked up. It's like in the Scandinavian. There's very, very low crime. There tends to be very low crime in homogeneous societies because everybody knows everybody else. They all come from the same genetic code, right? This is controversial, but you have to face this fact. When that is broken up, and now you have different communities within the community, you have different subsets, cultural and community subsets. It's harder to detect crime in that kind of environment.
Okay,
that's what I've observed.
Okay,
right. A lot of people ain't gonna want to say this, but it's a fact.
So, and that's part of the challenge that we're saying.
Of course it is.
Here. Okay.
Because if the police are investigating a murder in one part of the community, and people in that community are looking at the police as alien, or a section of the police as being alien, and they ain't part of we.
Yeah.
I gonna have to look after my cousin, you know.
Yeah.
I leave it. You know. So as far as I'm concerned, they're not part of us. You know, it's going to be harder to detect crime in that kind of environment. How do you solve that problem? That is where you're going to have to. The police are going to, and the society is going to have to decide how we're going to solve this, and you know, then we go into other issues, which will come up eventually.
Okay. So, what's your thoughts as far as
while I agree with most of what he has said, I think there are probably three factors that play into crime. I remember hearing a long time ago from a psychologist who says, within a family, your parents have a certain influence on you, and the streets have a certain influence on you. And your parents' influence isn't necessarily as strong as those influences on the street. That was back in, telling my age now, that was in college back in 87, right? We didn't have access to internet then. We didn't have cable TV with 1,000 channels. Whether we want to believe it or not, the influences from the media and the psychology that goes behind it. It's like, I don't know if most people know why there are playgrounds inside of McDonald's. There are playgrounds inside of McDonald's because someone figured out a long time ago that kids decide where parents go to eat. They start screaming, they start shouting, they start screaming, McDonald's, there's a clown. They can play on the rides, and that is an influence. So the psychology behind things these days are playing a much larger role. I still will go back to the foundation of the family. I think, you know, I grew up Seventh-day Adventist, and the foundation of what I believe God's plan to be is mother, father, child. It is challenging to raise a child on your own. The financial responsibilities. In a society like this, where there's so much wealth around you.
But the cost of living is very high, eh?
So much wealth around you. Who wants to be poor? Who wants to be middle class? Everyone wants to be rich, wealthy. They want to mimic those images and that success that they see around them and on television. And again, so now you're talking about young people being influenced by what they see around them. Fast boats, fancy cars, nice clothes.
But isn't this part of the shift I'm talking about?
This
from when you had a village when everybody knew each other, when you know, and now
everybody
with wealth,
shared and took care of each other.
but now now we've had this.
Well, I beg to differ. I beg to differ in this way. The village did not have the influences and the psychology behind it back in those days. We're living in a new time.
True.
Whereas media, mass media, you know, many of us have seen the experiments where they took white kids and they took black kids and they gave them a dolly. One dolly was dark skin with brushy hair, and the next dolly was blonde hair and blue eye. And they asked the white kids which doll they loved the more, and 10 out of 10 that child chose the white dolly.
Right.
Then they did the same experiment with black kids, and 10 out of 10 times the black kid chose the white dolly also. And then when they asked them who was the bad child, they chose the black dolly. So what now, from the time you are, and these kids are 6 and 7 and 8 years old. So if you grew up with that mentality already, that you are bad and your self-esteem is low.
True.
And then you have parents who don't know better that tell kids you are bad. You tell someone they are bad long enough,
they believe it.
They believe it. You tell them that you have high expectations and that they're good even when they make mistakes. Because the crime is not just happening among middle class or poor. You have some very wealthy families here whose children are committing crime.
Correct.
So it's not just a matter of you didn't have the opportunity or you don't have the education. there must be something else. And I say that something else is the influence of mass media and what they see in their environment.
But mass media
We're
is
a product of our environment.
Yeah.
Correct. But mass media is one of the major influences, and I totally agree with the young man here. But there are also other composites, like, for example, porous borders. Right? A lot of guns come through our borders, I understand. Right? That's one. We also on the cost. We also like in the area of drugs, right? From Latin America through to the U.S. So there's a lot of these composites.
Yeah, but even when we talk about whether it's the immigration, gun smuggling, human trafficking, when we're looking at the headlines today, even just today, we were just talking before the show that there was a robbery in front of a local bank. To me, those things are not related to neither human trafficking, gun smuggling, or necessarily immigration. Because that the sad part for me is that persons who are responsible for security don't think they're responsible for allowing us to have the statistics as far as what exactly are the crime demographics. Right. Who is committing the crimes, the age ranges. We don't need names and numbers. That we could log on and be no fun. But it's something where we need to see really what the trends are, to have an intelligent debate really about how we do fix crime around here. Because for me, there were times when it is, if certain criminal activity was taking place, people would, when it was connected to drug smuggling, people would say. And then there are other times when, again, where do I attribute, someone going and robbing somebody in front of a bank? You hide it?
Well, you speak of that, and I agree with you. Guns, we can do a better job of the flow of guns into the community by doing more spot checks and things like that. With regards to crime and the boldness of it, and this is where I agree with you 110%. Our porous borders are not just people sneaking into this country. I mean, our porous borders will also boil down to serious background checks, and the technology is there now for people who are coming into our country. Because the first thing in which the gentleman mentioned with regards to our societies, we had these small societies that really cared about each other. The neighbor didn't go hungry because the village looked out for that person when they were down. If your child was sick, it meant the whole village was going to do what they needed to do to try to help them. If for whatever reason you were... And so we've changed from that. And you have different people coming into our country. And I think it's paramount that proper background checks be done. And if you are a visitor or you have come to live in the Virgin Islands and you misbehave and commit a crime, I mean, I don't want to be hard and fast and say any crime, because people make mistakes and we can't be so hard and fast. But if you are caught with a gun, if you are robbing places, if you are stealing, automatic, you go home. It's like I've invited you into my home and you're disrespecting my home. At that point, you leave. You go back to your home or you find another home. But you can't stay in my home. You should be on your best behavior. But what happens is someone knows someone. Someone has a friend. Someone's married to someone who knows a politician. Someone has another friend up in immigration. And so it slides. But it slides once, it slides 100 times, it slides 1,000 times. And then we have a country that is full of people who have no respect for our laws. I remember I grew up in New York. And I don't care for Giuliani, I'll make that clear. But I remember when he gathered up a lot of people from the Caribbean that was committing crime in the States, in New York in particular, and sent them all back home. Crime dropped.
There you go.
Like that. And in other Caribbean islands, crime increased. Some of these people, never even grew up in the country that they were coming from, but they were sent back. Because you've been given an opportunity in a place that is beautiful. There's money to be made. You could live off the land and be well.
Right.
There are lots of opportunities in the BVI.
Oh, yeah.
And if you're going to come here and not respect the laws, not respect the people, not respect the customs, then I think, you know,
exactly.
You revoke that privilege.
But it's not just
you revoke, and there should be no, like I said, you know, I'm not hard and fast to say that, you know, if you're a teenager and you do something a little of the way we're going to, you should at least have a chance to redeem yourself. But if you're a grown adult and you are caught committing a major crime,
you go back home.
There should be no discussion. There should be no discussion.
Yeah.
But it's not even that. But the thing is, when you have these subsets, these other communities committing crimes, it makes the native local community more hardened. That's something I really believe. Because when you say okay, this group is committing crimes, that group is committing, we might as well, we might as well do something for our own selves. It's a negative dynamic. You know, when that breakdown, it's like the UK, this terrorism thing in the UK, it's the same thing. Different communities, the UK allowed in all these people from the Middle East and stuff, and now they have this terrorism problem.
Yeah.
Migration, whether you like it or not, plays a factor in crime.
Yeah, but I think we also, you know, I'm very mindful of, because we're using crime in a very broad sense.
Yeah.
Okay? Last night I love studying world wars. Last night I was watching Oliver North on television. Oliver North is considered a war hero. But Oliver North, the Reagan administration was responsible during the Contra War of dumping tons, if not millions of tons of drugs in exchange for weapons into the United States.
Very sure.
Swept across the whole country. It is a problem now that is being discussed. Now, he never went to jail. It's considered a white-collar crime. But the devastating effects. In 1986, when I graduated from high school, if you got caught with drugs, the federal government was paying $60,000 per year to keep you in jail. That was more than doctors graduating and lawyers graduating was making in New York at the time. White collar crime. Nobody got shot, nobody got stabbed. They don't look violent. But the ripple effect that they have, again, on schools, on health, on neighborhoods, on police, on roads, on bridges.
And the economic power of
and the
people.
economics and the opportunities and so forth is devastating. So while we may be frightened as hell from the guy who has the mask who's robbing somebody for $50, we also have to be mindful of white collar crime and how the ripple effect affects our society.
Oh, yeah.
And the money that goes towards education, towards infrastructure, and other things.
No, white collar crime is a composite. It's definitely a factor in the crime we have in the BVI right now.
But we'd never look at it. We never question it.
Yeah, we don't talk about it.
We don't talk about it. But
because they don't seem violent.
No, because the kids understand. As you said earlier, the kids look at these people who get away with murder. They do what they like, and and they say, okay, why not? I might as well, I might as well get my share.
Yeah.
So don't forget, if the head is rotten, the whole body rots like a fish. Okay. So we cannot tolerate white collar crime. We can't. Right. And it's a very political issue as well in the BVI, right? So
because who goes to jail and who gets to roam the streets has everything to do, or a lot to do, with your wealth, your political influence, and how good an attorney you have to fight your case.
Because don't forget.
Well, let me interject here because we need to take a commercial break, and we will be right back. Good evening and welcome back to the Vigilante Dialogues. I am your host, Shaina Smith. And with me this evening, we have Mr. Dickson Igwe and Mr. Frank Mahoney. And we've been having a conversation in conjunction with our Stop the Violence VI campaign, because it's something that concerns me as a citizen in regards to what we're seeing going on in the community. When we open up our newspapers, we're seeing the headlines with bullying, with child abuse, with domestic violence, and murders, gun crime, burglary, you name it. It's almost as if we are living in the US now, because that's where I went to college, and it's like every day, 4 or 5 times a day you hear either the fire, the police, or the ambulance going. And when you turn on the news in the evening, then you get to see, well, you know, there was a crime or something happened at the apartment complex, something is right down the road from you, or something was happening with police maybe chasing somebody who was trying to escape from the scene of a crime, and these different things. And I'm, you know, concerned that we here in the BVI are starting to pat on some of these things that we've seen. We talked a little bit about before in terms of the media's role in these things and seeing what they are, but you also had an interesting discussion on the break in terms of, again, asking the question of why is the crime being committed? And I want us to touch on now, like, the economic factor. You know, we talk about there is youth unemployment, and again, there's no statistics either way to tell us, well, yes, there's youth unemployment, but how much is it? Has it increased over the last 5 to 10 years? What categories are we looking at? You know, what is the reason that's being given by the young persons in terms of why they don't have a job? You know, because for sometimes it's somebody who they have a skill deficiency, so they've been bouncing around from job to job, and after a while they themselves get frustrated and stop trying to even look for a job. You know, so what are we saying is or what do we think is in terms of the economic factors? Is it that they're stealing for money? Is it because it's a part of gang initiation, or what influence from negative influences from friends? What's happening?
You know, again, crime is values driven, in my opinion. It's not necessarily poverty is a factor in crime, but it's mostly your values, right? You know, our values have shifted in the BVI, you know, from a religious kind of community, from a religious community where honesty and these virtues were put on a pedestal, were highly valued. Today it's materialism. We're a very materialistic culture. You know, again, it's come with the change in the economy to services, tourism, migration coming in. We now have a much faster paced community. It's all about the dollar bill. Even in church, you go these days. You know, I talk about this all the time. It's all about This is a Joneses phenomenon now. Even in church, you know, who bought the latest car, who got the newest car, blah blah blah. And these things have a negative impact on the value system. You know, people don't talk about goodness and about the virtues of good health anymore, and about, you know, it's all about how big is your house. You know, what car do you drive? It's a materialism, and as a result, our young people now are looking at this as the begin all and end all. They don't care anymore. You know, as long as the end justifies the means.
As far as getting what they want, what's your thoughts?
I think the BVI became rather wealthy almost overnight when you look at our society and some of the older societies in the world. We became rich almost overnight. We had some our situation with regards to us using the US dollar played a large role. But the challenge with wealth minus morality, and based on what he says, and a lot of what we learned growing up in this society, we learned from our parents, our aunts, our uncles, the church, the schools. There was a relationship, and while it exists still between the teachers and the parents and what was going on, it has eroded. We go back again to the family, because again, I think the family is the foundation. So you're 18 years old, you have 2 children, there's no father figure around. You're working to try to support your family. Who is looking after the children?
Right.
Who is influencing the children? Who is molesting the children? Who is teaching the children bad habits? You have to work 40, maybe 60 hours. You're hoping that the influences that are around your children, when they get out of school at 3 o'clock and finally come in for dinner at 6, is okay. But it's not.
Yeah, not all the time.
You see, again,
no, not only is it not all the time, it is becoming not more often than it is. And so now you multiply those numbers and
problem.
Yeah, you end up with the statistic that we have
you
now.
end up, so the parents cannot control the children. And if the parents cannot control the children and they're not learning it at home, then who are you shifting this responsibility to now? Well, the teachers, right? So now the teachers, and then when the teacher tries to enforce some type of behavior, the parents, young, sometimes uneducated themselves, come up to the school and curse out the teacher.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Now when the child sees the parent cursing out the teacher, that means this child has no respect
for authority.
So he has no respect for the teacher, he has no respect for the police, he has no respect for anyone. Trying to hold on a job is almost impossible. He has no respect for the guy who's paying his bills. So now he ends up on the streets. So now he has to make some money. And now selling some weed, which they can get for maybe $2 and sell for a profit, becomes very attractive. And then if you graduate, maybe you sell keys. And at that point, you're buying yourself a nice car, a nice boat, the ladies are looking at you, you're feeling good. And why shouldn't you? To a certain extent, your street credibility has brought you to a middle class level without an education. And it's illegitimate, but it's short-term thinking for long-term solutions. So I think that is a vicious cycle that begins, and it begins again at home. Sometimes it's not always the parents that can help influence. It could be an uncle, it could be an aunt, it could be a good friend. Sometimes when we don't have those influences around, as you get older, it's up to you as an adult, 25, 30, to ask someone who you look up to and respect in the society to be your mentor. Even at the age of 40.
Correct.
It's a learning process.
But you see, again, it comes down to this shift in our community of our values. If you look at the Caucasian community, for example, they have a value system, you know. You see the white kids, let's be honest, you don't see that crime element. Obviously, there's a reason for that. It's a much better off community in financial terms.
We're talking about locally or in general?
Locally. Let's look at it locally. Even general, but let's look even general. There's an economic factor involved. But, you know, they tend to have stronger nuclear families, right? That's their value system. Our value system was the village. This single parent thing is not a new thing. We had single parents from ages, but we had a strong village. We had, you know, everybody looked after everybody else, right? You know, as soon as your child was on the street, everybody knew where your child was.
Yeah.
That's no longer the case anymore.
So let's talk about
hold on a
solutions.
second. I beg to differ that white families are. I think it is easier when you are earning a certain level of money that affords a certain education level, that affords a certain nanny, that affords.
But that's what I'm saying. There's economic.
Now, you go back. Let's go back, right? You go back to our village system and how that worked and the respect. And we didn't have much.
That's what I'm saying. The village looked after everybody else.
But we had each other, and we had morals, and we had the church.
Right. We've lost that.
Which played a huge role.
Okay.
Economics within, because if you want to say that, then you can say, well, most families earning over $200,000 in the BVI who are sending their children to private school, let's say 7 out of 10 times the kids do not end up in court or in jail or in crime. But even when they do, if they can afford the best attorneys to scrub the record.
It's an economic thing, right?
Yeah,
right?
It's a different outcome.
It's a different outcome. Okay. So I don't think there's anything special about whether you're black or white
but the
or
fact
Asian.
remains,
But I think your economic position probably plays more of a role.
Right.
My opinion.
Okay.
No, you're right. But the fact remains that predominantly it's a black.
We have to say why.
Yeah.
We have
no,
to.
but
I'm
telling you why. Because as a black people, we have been impacted by two factors. One of them is the fact that we've lost the village. And the second factor is we've had a lot of people come in and live among us and have further taken away that value system from us.
But see, the thing for me though is that immigration is again not anything new. Just like how single parenting is not anything new.
Correct.
So, and we've talked about this on other shows as far as how we've allowed our culture or customs and our traditions to become diluted, as it were, through intermarriage. Because it's not necessarily a bad thing if you have immigration in your society.
No, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but you have to look at it as a factor.
It is a factor, but the question though it becomes though is like, if say for example, right, like we went up touching on the fact that we've always been a religious society, so godly morals we've always had some type of moral code, so to speak. So you don't go and take up anything that's not yours. These are the things that we're taught as children now. You don't take up anything that's not yours. You don't disrespect somebody who's older than you. And you know, these are all things that we took for granted as just manners. You hang your hat where you reach it. You know, and if you can't afford something, then you don't.
You leave it alone. Those are very good values. And in fact, those are values that I live by in a sense, because I respect frugal people. I respect people who live within their means, who live below their means. I respect savers. I find people who save and who live a frugal life, you know, tend to be happier anyway. They're contented. But these issues, things like contentment, frugality, saving, the young people don't want to hear that now. They want to go to the bank and they want to borrow.
Well, that's not what they've been taught. This is the next thing, because it's whatever they're taught is what it is they are going to practice. Whether it's been taught by their parents or it's been taught by media or it's something, you know, whether it's in school to their friends or whatever. But we're running down on time, so I want to touch, we've been talking solutions throughout the discussion, but to kind of hone in now on some of those key things that we need to start to pay attention to. So definitely in terms of the family environment, what we're teaching and training our kids up with, whether it's, you know, for me, it's something where when it comes to immigration, it's about people bringing in a different value set. More so than just people coming into your community, because we as a region come off the same boat.
Oh, we
have the same descent. And for the most part, there are a lot of things that are shared in regards to our values. But what you tend to see in terms of migration now, I mean, those who are well off are not going to leave their country. It's those who are not necessarily as well off, looking for economic opportunities, who will come into your society. So their value set may be different to what it is now they're working at. Do we need to do a better job in terms of integration?
Yeah,
because somebody has to be the dominant culture.
Integration. Yeah, but if you migrate to another community, I've always said this, you need to, when in Rome, do as the Romans do, okay? You know, if you go to another community, try and integrate into that community, try and respect the culture and respect the values of that community. And I find that is the best model.
So in terms of our case here though, what is it that we've been doing? Because you alluded to it earlier, where we tend to basically become exclusive. So there's a Filipino community, there's a Vietnamese community, there's a Santo Domingo community, there's a St. Vincent, there's a Jamaican. And it's almost as if the BVI is scattered throughout some place. As it were. So there's that holding fast in terms of saying this is the core.
There's no core. Community. There's no real core any longer.
Okay, but then who took away our core?
Well, who took away our core?
Did someone take our core? Is there anyone that is preventing BVI landers from getting together?
No.
Is there anyone that is stopping BVI landers from being kinder and more loving and respectful in their community?
No.
Can we blame that on immigration or
no one is blaming on immigration, but you cannot ignore the fact.
No, while they have influence. I grew up in New York. In New York was the same thing.
But this is the thing for me. If the core is as strong as it's supposed to be, it doesn't care. We could have 150, we're up to 120 now. It doesn't matter who comes. Because it's the same thing with Jamaica. We're not unique with this migration thing. If Jamaica was to get up, they'd probably tell you they have a lot of people in there from different cultures.
But Jamaica has a crime problem like everywhere else.
We understand
that. If you don't want a crime problem, you might as well start speaking.
The reasons for that isn't necessarily migration.
No one is saying it's necessarily migration is a factor in crime. In the UK, terrorism, the terrorism problem they have in the UK is a result of migration. That's a fact. Right? The political correctness says don't say that. You're not allowed to say something.
There's a different value set that's come into the community now, and they see them as the enemy. So that's a whole different platform they're running with the terrorism thing.
Terrorism is a crime. Stealing is all crime is crime. Once you break the law, it's a crime.
Yeah.
Okay. And again, you know, the fact remains that there's certain antithetical subsets in cultures. You know, if you let in a culture into your country that's antithetical to your value set, and you expect peace and love, it ain't gonna happen.
Yeah.
Okay. When you are vetting people to come into the BVI, check their culture. Okay. So
but wouldn't that be considered no profiling and saying that we...
you have to profile. The Israelis are wonderful at profiling. That's why they live in the middle of the most violent region of the world, right? And they profile you and they check you out, and they need to. Otherwise, you go to bed at night and get somebody put a bomb up in your bedroom. Okay? So you have to profile. You have to check out who is coming to your community, and you have to know the background of people in your community. It's simple security.
Yeah.
But we're so politically correct. We don't want to do these things. We you know.
Don't want to offend anybody.
You have to do these things.
Yeah.
Otherwise, one day you wake up and when that bomb goes off, God forbid, it could be you and your family.
Yeah.
Okay. Sometimes you have to be fanatical, just as fanatical as the criminal. Okay. The criminals are fanatical. They're very organized, right? They have, in fact, the criminals these days are more intelligent than police. We know that. They have more resources. They're more intelligent. You know, and they're more ruthless.
Yeah.
To fight the criminal, you have to adopt even more. You know, a more radical kind of culture.
Yeah, but then it sounds if we okay, you would have to get to the root. You're not, you know, in today's society, let's face it, we're not going to stop all crime. We're going to, the objective would have to be to reduce crime.
And prevent what we can prevent.
Correct.
Right. It starts with the youth.
Well,
it starts with the families, but it starts with the youth. It starts with opportunities. I said a long time ago, and I've said it to the present minister, and I've said it to the minister before that. In my opinion, if we're the yacht sailing capital, if we're huge in financial services, from the time they enter school, every student that wants to, unless they have other objectives, to me, you should graduate. Here's your dive certification. Here's your captain's license. Here's your high school diploma. At this point, you're now graduating with 3 opportunities to go out there and earn an honest living and an income at minimal cost and investment.
But I'm one of the biggest advocates of this maritime thing, right?
Yeah.
You know, I'm a swimming instructor. I teach kids to swim, and I teach kids.
So we should never, we should never be importing a captain,
right,
or a skipper, because every child that graduated that's interested
should have that opportunity.
I remember one summer, my son, my niece, and my cousin's son at my home in the summertime, eating my food up, running my air condition up till 3 o'clock in the morning. One day I jumped them, I took them all up, took them down to Blue Water Divers in Nanny Key. And in 2 weeks they were all certified divers.
There you go. And that is what.
So now this is a little notch in the belt.
Yeah.
They may never do it, but it
have access.
They have the opportunity, and that's the thing with kids graduating.
Programs.
Give them as much opportunities as possible to prevent them from going into a world of crime or illegality and so forth.
And it's not just us who understand this. You know, I know for a fact that Unite BVI, right, which is linked to Virgin, and CATS BVI, which is
my
part
son
of,
was CATS when he was
CATS is my I'm integral with CATS. Are ready to sponsor a national swimming program. In fact, they're ready to do it right now. If we can get things together, where all our kids in the BVI will start getting to learn how to swim skillfully and proficiently. From there, they learn how to dive, and then they can go and become sailors. They can go into sailing, go into boating. These are what we need to be looking at right now, because it's out there. We have the environment. So instead of our kids riding scooter and killing themselves on the road, they'll be out there learning how to swim, how to dive, how to sail a boat.
I agree. It starts from young. Same thing for financial services. Allow each financial company to adopt, whether it be 5 or 6 or 10. By the time they get to their junior year, they're sending off to do internship, whether in Hong Kong or where have you. And by the time they graduate, They've now been overseas. They've now had the experience. And whether they go into that sector or not, they are trained.
Yeah.
Because more than 60% of the people who graduate with a degree don't do what their degree is about. They end up doing something else. But again, opportunities.
Yeah.
So now you have to figure, am I going to go out here and take risk and sell this little nickel bag to make X amount of dollars? Or am I going to sharpen my customer service skills, go to Peter Island or Necker Island and do a charter that's $500-600?
Correct.
I don't have to worry about the police chasing me down.
Correct.
I can legally put my money in the bank and get a loan when it's time to pay. It spurs all kinds of other positive aspects of what can be done.
We are not leveraging our opportunities in the BVI for our children. We are leveraging the opportunities for everybody else. But we need to leverage the maritime opportunities for our kids. Listen, there'll be no, you know that, there'll be no unemployment if the kids were in the maritime industry. All this job fair and thing, they'll be too busy. Learning how to fixing boats, painting boats, washing boats.
And I can tell you, he speaks of boats. I have boats, and I can tell you, trying to get a mechanic for a small engine even, you have to wait. They are busy beyond. You have how many boats the mooring has? Every one of those engines have to be serviced and maintained. How many companies are moving in here every day? We should have a world-class maritime
academy.
Same thing for mechanics.
We need a maritime academy.
And they don't just have to stay here. You know, just like we've invested in the arbitration center and the commercial court and banks and so forth. I heard Richard Branson say it. He said the same opportunities and loans that we're giving for kids to go to college, we should also give to young entrepreneurs. It makes sense. It makes sense.
All right, gentlemen, we're waiting on our time. Last words. And I'm glad we got to this point, because I think that's one of the key things. After our family, it's about what are those economic opportunities that we are setting our children up for. Not just giving them a diploma and saying, well, go fend for yourself, figure it out. We have to be intentional with it. Because for me, the money we are going to take up and put them on the road to sponsor bush cutting, you need to put into a summer program or whatever break it is that we're talking about in terms of internship. And, you know, start to groom them and show them what is out there that they can take advantage of and see what piques their interest that they're able to go to. So 30 seconds, real quick.
Let's not give up on our kids. We've all made mistakes. We've all fallen getting up. If we give up on our kids, it opens the door to illicit crime. At the end of the day, they still want love. They still want respect. They still want to succeed. They're going to either succeed legally, or if we shun them, whether because they've been to jail or they've gotten themselves in some trouble, let's give them a chance. Let's not give up on them. Let's embrace them. Let's show them a better way. And even, I'll say this as well, at 40, you're still not too old to find a mentor. At 50, you're still not old to find a mentor. Someone you look up to and respect, someone who has went down the road that you've went down that can show you a better way. And I think if each one teaches one, and I think if we don't give up on our young people and make sure that our education system is of the 21st century and prepares them for the real world. More than 70% of the people in the world fail at math. There's a reason why.
Anyway, I'm going to end again with the kids. And as I said, we need to leverage our natural beauty, our natural resources, you know, through maritime activity, as you said, tourism and all these things. And we have to get our kids at the core of these activities. So as I said before, CATS, Unite BVI, these kind of organizations, welcome.
There are opportunities there.
You know, they're willing to spend money. They're willing to train instructors, maritime instructors, swimming instructors, lifeguards, all these kind of people. Let's go for it. Let's do it.
Definitely. Well, gentlemen, I thank you for a very insightful conversation. I know we might have said some controversial things, but that's all part of what the conversation needs to be about if we're going to become better. If you've just tuned in, you missed an awesome show, but you can catch us on YouTube. Just go in and search for Vigilate Dialogues. We're also on Facebook, where you can catch our postings, leave your comments or suggestions as far as guests or topic ideas. I am your host, Shaina Smith, saying, let us continue the change in conversation for a better Virgin Islands.